Hey everyone, welcome to Logan's Mosh Pit. Glad to have you here. So today we're going to continue the Breaking Down Songs series, the place where we take a look at some of my favorite songs from all kinds of different bands and analyze the lyrics. Because I think when we do that, we gain a deeper appreciation for the music we listen to. So today we're going to do a band that needs no introduction, as you might have guessed, the legendary Pink Floyd. One of the true juggernauts of their time, one of the most beloved bands of all time. Before I forget, if there's a specific band you guys want me to cover in a future episode, leave a comment down below. If I like the band and I'm pretty familiar with their discography, I'll probably do it. So without further ado, let's get started with Pink Floyd. So first, I want to tell you guys about my favorite song from my top 5 Pink Floyd albums. We don't have time to go through all their discography. Plus, I haven't listened to all their albums, so I'm just going to go through my top 5, go from there. So, first off, at number 5, from their debut album, The Piper at the Gates of Dawn, I picked The Gnome. It's a funny track. I think Syd Barrett had a knack for introducing lyrics that made you laugh. They were very lighthearted and childlike, and one of the things that Pink Floyd really benefited from, helped get them off the ground. So next up, we have Hey You from The Wall. Fantastic, creepy track. I almost picked it as my absolute favorite. Now some of you might be complaining that I only rank The Wall as my 4th favorite Pink Floyd album, and I can understand why. I get it. I still think The Wall is a great album. I wouldn't be wearing this shirt based on The Wall if I didn't like it. But the only problem I have with The Wall is it's just so long, you know. It lasts over 80 minutes. You have in excess of 20 tracks, and when you combine that with the fact that there have been a ton of radio stations that overplay certain songs like Another Brick in the Wall or Comfortably Numb, those type of songs, after a while you get tired of it. I mean, you start to lose interest in songs that you've heard over and over, even if they are brilliant. They start to wear you down. So that's the main reason why I'm not a huge fan of The Wall. Like I said, it's still brilliant, but I think other Pink Floyd albums have a slightly stronger track list. When you listen to the majority of the songs, you don't get the fun taken out of it because you've heard it over and over. So moving on to the Animals album, I picked the epic track Dogs. And then from the huge album, The Dark Side of the Moon, I went with Brain Damage. And finally, from Wish You Were Here, the top spot, I picked Shine On You Crazy Diamond, which is a tribute song to Syd Barrett. Did an outstanding job there. Really showed how much influence Syd Barrett still had on the band. Even years after he left, they still missed him, wanted to pay homage to him. Just a quick side note before we get into my favorite song, Brain Damage. It was very hard to narrow down this list. My favorite song might change tomorrow if you ask me, but today we're going to go with Brain Damage. But anyway, just a quick side note before we start analyzing Brain Damage. I think we should just take a moment to appreciate how magical Pink Floyd truly was in the studio. I mean, they went all out. They pushed the sound effects to the limits. They were so ahead of their time, so I think they deserve a tremendous amount of credit for that. Not settling, trying to make each album as memorable as it could be. So now let's talk about some background on the Dark Side of the Moon album, which Brain Damage came from. It came out in 1973, and it was a massive success, which might be an understatement. But it sold 45 million copies worldwide and 15 million in the US, which is definitely impressive. Then you had the singles Money, which you hear constantly on the radio, and Us and Them. Of course, you have the amazing image of the prism on the cover with the beam of light shining through on one side. Then emerging from the other side is a beautiful rainbow. Very memorable. Maybe the first image Pink Floyd fans think of when you mention them. And it feels like a very personal type of album. It goes through things like greed, time, mental health, stuff that ordinary people like you and me go through every day. So it's very relatable. And then huge thanks to engineer Alan Parsons. You might recognize him from the Beatles albums, Abbey Road and Let It Be. He had a lot to do with that behind the scenes. So I think they made a fine choice choosing him to work on the album. And he went all out with the synthesizers, man. He was going crazy in the studio. I mean, then Pink Floyd was one of the first to, use double tracks on their guitars and vocals. It wasn't as common back then as it is now. And then they added a bunch of effects like the coins on Money, which added a lot to the songs. And this becomes even more impressive when you think back to the early 70s. Technology was more limited back then. Computers weren't widespread, so they didn't have as much equipment to, utilize. So that makes the quality of the production even more mind-blowing. Pink Floyd is one of those bands, when you listen to their song, your mouth just drops open. You're like, what did I just listen to? Because they weren't afraid to experiment and push the boundaries of what was possible. Feels like every second of the Dark Side of the Moon album was meant to be there. They went over it with a fine-tooth comb. Made sure it was the best it could possibly be. And there's some great documentaries on YouTube that I've watched before about the behind-the-scenes making of the Dark Side of the Moon and Wish You Were Here albums, so I highly recommend checking those out. I don't think you'll be disappointed. It's pretty fascinating seeing how all that stuff got combined into this epic album. So now let's get down to the lyrics themselves of Brain Damage. Just keep in mind this is my interpretation of the lyrics. Your opinion might be different from mine, and that's fine. We all hear these songs differently. And the beautiful thing about songs is they can be interpreted countless different ways. There's no right or wrong answer, so let's respect each other's opinions. So the first part of verse 1 says, "The lunatic is on the grass, the lunatic is on the grass, remembering games and daisy chains and laughs, gotta keep the loonies on the path." So here, I think it's all about how no matter how much someone deteriorates from a mental standpoint, you can still see flashes of their old self. They're not completely gone. All hope isn't lost. And you still have a responsibility to take care of them the best that you can. That's what I got out of it. Moving on to the next part of verse 1, it goes, "The lunatic is in the hall, the lunatics are in my hall. The paper holds their folded faces to the floor, and every day the paper boy brings more." Powerful lyrics there. So I think this part highlights how insanity has no boundaries. It doesn't discriminate. It can affect anyone, anywhere, anytime. No one is immune to its effects. And the person in the song is being forced to endure more pain every day with no end in sight, no escape. They're trapped in this bubble. And life goes on uninterrupted for other people. So now let's get to the chorus. It goes, "And if the dam breaks open many years too soon, and if there is no room upon the hill, and if your head explodes with dark forebodings too, I'll see you on the dark side of the moon." So I think the chorus is really hitting on the point where going over how fragile the human mind actually is. I mean, it only takes one traumatic moment or event to cause irreversible damage that completely changes a person. And as a result, they can become cast out by the world or ridiculed for being abnormal, not fitting in with what society considers to be normal. So they have thoughts of escaping and being able to find peace somewhere else, have that comfort that they were never offered in life. So moving on to verse 2, the first part says, "The lunatic is in my head," laughing in the background. "The lunatic is in my head. You raise the blade, you make the change." So I think this part is about how your mind can turn on you easily, become your own worst enemy, transform you into something you never thought you could be. It makes you second guess what you once believed about yourself. And ultimately, you're the only one who has the power to fix your problems, change what's going on. It goes back to that old saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. It's the same concept here. Someone can't change unless they're willing to put in the effort and the time to make the change. Help from other people can only get you so far. Motivation has to come from within before you notice any difference. So, deep stuff. Now the next part, verse 2, says, "You rearrange me till I'm sane. You lock the door and throw away the key. And there's someone in my head, but it's not me." So I think this means how your thoughts can cloud your judgment, change your personality. Like I said, it takes over your life and breaks the bonds with people who you believe were your friends, things that you held dear. You gradually get more isolated. You withdraw from everyone. Go into your own bubble. Don't want to be around other people. So then we get back to a slightly tweaked chorus, but still the same idea throughout. It says, "And if the cloud bursts, thunder in your ear, you shout and no one seems to hear. And if the band you're in starts playing different tunes, I'll see you on the dark side of the moon." So it's basically the same concept about your mind turning against you, becomes something you hate, and taking away everything that you cared about. It's about reaching out for help but being ignored. So you can't make any progress. You're stuck where you're at. Then at the very end you have the outro. "I can't think of anything to say except," then the laugh track again. "I think it's marvelous," then the laugh track again, which I think was kind of showing Sid's influence in the band. You have those lighthearted lyrics, which are a callback to earlier Pink Floyd stuff. So now that we've gone over the lyrics, let's talk about the mood a little bit. How do you feel when you listen to Brain Damage? If I had to describe it in one word, I would say mesmerizing. It makes you feel some really disturbing emotions, but somehow you feel compelled to keep listening. There's that curiosity building up. You want to find out what happens next in the song. It's set up like a horror movie, with those grotesque scenes. You want to look away from the screen, but somehow you can't. You need to find out what's going to happen next. But it's basically the same idea. Pink Floyd was a master at drawing people into their songs, getting you involved with more than just your ears, appealing to your senses through vision, through smell, through touch, taste, all of those things coming together. So some themes that I picked out of the song are obviously a big one is Syd Barrett. I think the band was still reeling from his absence, even though it had been years since he lost his mind and had to leave the band. I think he still affected them. And if you look hard enough on certain songs, you can still hear his influence, how much they missed him. He left a huge void in the band. This song is definitely no exception. Then it highlights how important mental health is and how it needs to be taken seriously. It needs to be put first in your life. Because if you don't have a stable mental health, everything else in your life just falls apart. And then finally, it talks about how selfish people act today. I think it draws attention to that. How there's a lack of compassion and understanding out there. How people are so quick to judge what they don't understand or judge people who don't fit in and make fun of them. Which is a shame. So the most memorable line here from the song is, I could have picked so many, but I went with, there's someone in my head, but it's not me. I think that sums up the main idea of the song, how you become so tarnished, so hurt from everything that has happened that you become a shell of your former self. So, what are the strengths and weaknesses of brain damage? Well, one of the biggest strengths is just the creativity of the lyrics. Pink Floyd's one of those bands that make you think. I mean, you gotta listen to their songs multiple times to digest the material. You can't just listen to it once and completely understand it. You have to go back and go through it again to understand it completely. Because there's so much going on, so many elements battling between each other. Then next up you have the subtle touches, like the laughter in the background. That enhances the experience. It makes the song deeper, gives it more of a connection, makes it more appealing to listen to. I think the subtle things, like certain sound effects, can make the biggest difference. And then finally, it highlighted how mental health has become more prevalent in recent years. You see more people acknowledging it, more people coming out and admitting they need help with their problems. And it didn't used to be that way. Mental health used to be something that you swept under the rug, but recently we're going through a transformation where it's okay to talk about. It's okay to admit you need help. So that makes this song even more relatable. So finally, on a scale of 1 to 10, how replayable is this song? How often are you going to want to come back to it? I would give it a solid 10 out of 10. I think it's a near perfect song, and there's hardly any flaws with the song. The only weakness that I found was that you need time to process the song. I mean, it's kind of a double-edged sword because Pink Floyd songs are so complicated that listening through it once isn't enough. I mean, there's so much going on that you gotta listen to it more than once to let the message sink in, fully grasp what's in front of you. So that's the only flaw I found, but it doesn't take away anything from the replayability. I think you'll still feel the same kind of emotions you did the first time as the 1000th time you listen to it. It holds up great, as most Pink Floyd songs do. So that's all I have for you guys. That does it for today's video. If you want to listen to the song Brain Damage, I left a link in the description for you. I hope you enjoyed the video. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. I really appreciate the support. I'll see you next time. Until then, rock on.